talk about everything from leadership styles, the difference between being an individual contributor and a leader, whether that's formal or informal within a company. And we'll then talk about a little bit, something you might be interested in is what the heck is Williams, if you don't already know. But also, being a natural gas-focused company, how does that blend? What's the cohesiveness and the benefit of having an ESG or a sustainability program within that company? Some people see those in natural tension. We actually think that natural tension creates tremendous opportunity, both short-term and long-term. So we'll talk a little bit about that. If you don't know any of those acronyms, we can also talk about that. So feel free to ask questions along the way. You don't have to read this. I'll walk through it in a second. So we are just talking about the value of diversity, of perspective, of thought, of backgrounds. So I'm actually going to go off script before we even really get started and do something what's called the crossing the line exercise. Has anyone ever done that before? Yeah? So we're not going to make you stand up and step forward to cross a line. It's not like crossing the line meaning bad, meaning just stepping forward across a line to showcase something about yourself. What we're going to do is if you're comfortable doing it, you don't have to, but you'll just raise your hand if what I say describes you, okay? If you grew up in a place that you would consider rural, raise your hand. All right, raise them higher. All right, what about urban environment? Grew up in an urban environment. All right, so about 60-40-ish. Who grew up in a family with multiple siblings? Most of you. All right. What about you are the only child? Okay, that's new. My wife's an only child, so I love them dearly. But that's great to see. Who grew up in the state of Oklahoma? Who has never lived anywhere but Oklahoma? Who grew up outside of Oklahoma? What about another country? Excellent. Excellent. What about technical disciplines for their college studies? So undergrad, grad, anything like that. So who's in the SEAT college? Okay, about a third of you. What about Spears? Business. Excellent. What about more on the IT, MIS side? Excellent. I'm going to miss a lot of things. What about anything else? Most of you. Okay, throw a couple out. What are your degrees you're pursuing? Anybody? Communications.
Undergrad in French.
French, cool.
So definition and
Awesome. I had one up here too.
Nutrition.
All right, so we have these are pretty, I would say, surface level, maybe first level diversity type questions. But we can see just in this room, we have a tremendous amount of diversity, which probably is going to result in us having different perspective, different lines of thought, and different fact patterns that we go through based and informed by our experience. Like I said, that was off script, but the reason I bring that up is because a lot of what we do in the sustainability space is making sure that we are engaging and leveraging and, I would say, elevating the value of different perspective, because without that, we do not innovate. And in an industry that is hundreds of years old, like oil and gas, in a company that's over 100 years old, 116 that is, without that diversity of thought, without celebrating those differences, we're never going to innovate, we're never going to turn the page, we're never going to stay relevant. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. That's really maybe the last third of what we'll talk about. And it's mostly going to be driven by your questions, because I don't want to fill your head with only my opinions, because once again, I am a single person's perspective, and I want you all to share a little bit amongst yourselves. All right, so let's jump in a little bit more about my background, since I made you all share a little bit about yours. So I grew up in Oklahoma City, northwest side, right behind Deaconess Hospital, if anyone knows what that is. Is anyone from Oklahoma City? Oh, okay, sweet. I went to Putnam City Original High School. Go Pirates. So I've been orange and black pretty much my whole life. We've been orange and black through high school, through college. I decided to come to Oklahoma State after touring several universities. I went, unfortunately, south 30 minutes or so from Oklahoma City just to do my due diligence down to Norman. I went up to UCO, in Edmond, and then a couple other places around the region. But when I came here, I immediately knew this is where I wanted to be. You all probably have a similar experience, is that when you walked the sidewalks on tours, people smiled at you, as opposed to like looking down at their phones. Like that immediately sold me. This is a beautiful campus, and there's many beautiful campuses out there, but it was really the people that sold me. I decided civil engineering because a tale as old as time, probably most of you that are engineers or studying engineering or technical degrees in this room, I loved solving puzzles, I loved being outside, and I loved working with other people to do things that I couldn't do by myself. So that might mean working on projects, might be building something like a clubhouse, literally did that, very cliche, clubhouse style when I was like 8 or 9 years old wood planks and all that, but also competitive sports teams and all that. So I had a pretty standard, like suburban experience, but it was formed by a lot of other people. It was these engagements with other people that started to open me up to new perspectives. And that is why I went to engineering, is that I could leverage all of my interests and my strengths into something that also leveraged these broad array of experiences and interactions with more than just myself sitting at my desk or something like that. I wanted to be out with the people. And then, as you can imagine, I was a kind of nerd, did like crypto quotes, if you guys probably don't remember those. Sudoku, probably, is what you would know. Crossword puzzles, all that. I was doing that with my dad when I was just a kid. And then I decided to come to Oklahoma State and joined up with Williams as an intern by happenstance. I actually did not want to go into oil and gas at all. I wanted to be an engineer and not do oil and gas because I grew up in Oklahoma City. I was entirely surrounded by the Chesapeakes and the Sand Ridges and now the Devon Energies of the world. I was like, everyone does this. I don't want to do this. But through my experiences with people here and then going to the career fair and engaging with others, I was like, wow, these people are really cool. They're not pretentious at all. They're not like high and mighty. They do a great service for our country and the world, but they don't have this air of superiority. They like really want to get to know me personally. And right then and there, it started to formulate my view of like what it meant to be a professional beyond just the job, beyond just the industry. What does it mean to be a professional, a person in an organization? So those kind of started to turn the wheels and start to snowball how I view leadership and different things like that. So that was a lot of information. Let me give you the 30-second tour of my actual progression through the company. Started out as an intern, signed on full-time, did an engineering rotational program where I forcefully put myself into discomfort. I forcefully put myself into an environment where I would have to be challenged and learn. So I moved to, the first time living in Texas, I moved to Houston and worked out there in our corporate office for a year, building $300+ million projects. So these are massive projects. And then I took a complete right turn and I became a field engineer and sat next to our operations teams, and I had a responsibility for a very small subset of assets. So I was literally every day, if you can imagine. Has anyone been to Houston, South Louisiana? It's hot, it's humid, it's a swamp, literally a swamp, right? It's gross. Every day, boots on, full fire-resistant clothing, so jeans, you have a nice thick shirt, hard hat, the whole get up, every single day, just sweating as soon as you step out the door. So very different than the Houston corporate life experience. And then came back to Tulsa, where I did a lot of different things, mostly in our project execution and in our environmental realm, where I got to learn more about what are all of these things that people are talking about related to climate and clean water, clean air, all these different things. That's a whole nother talk we can talk about. If you have any specific questions on that afterward, we can connect. But 2 years ago, I took on what's called our ESG director role or sustainability role. Does anyone know what ESG stands for?
Environmental, social, and governance.
That's exactly right. Well done. I don't have any bonus points or badges to give out, but I'm really thankful for that. And it's something that's been ever growing, particularly right before COVID and into COVID. We really had this explosion of interest in these topics. But you all are in Oklahoma. So you all probably are also inundated with some anti-ESG type of sentiment. So we have a really interesting and great tension here that we can explore. If we have time, we'll do that. But I guess the bottom line is nothing is as simple as it seems from the outside. Y'all, I know the engineering professors talk about it, but I'm sure all of them do. The common answer is it depends. There's no absolute yes, there's no absolute no. Everything is it depends. So we can explore that later, but I wanted to get into some other things before we do. All right, before I do that, any questions? Like I said, we're going to have stops in the middle, just in case. Cool. Because I am a storyteller type, and I will go for hours. And you all probably don't want that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into engineering versus business versus people leadership. And those are just general topics, general buckets. For those of you who are in French or nutrition or different things like that, don't say that like, well, this isn't applicable to me. It doesn't matter. Hey, you can jump here if you want, if you're trying to cross. So don't think of it that I'm putting it in a bucket, but it might be helpful to put some of our discussion in a bucket because it can be applied more well across any different circumstance. So what do you think, if you had to throw, and people please throw out, what are some critical skills, critical competencies for a technical degree like engineering or MIS or IT? Math, okay, absolutely. Problem solving, absolutely. You have all these seat people in here, and what are you all studying? Time management, that's a really good one. Communication, absolutely. So even very technical things such as metallurgy, strength of materials, dynamics, thermodynamics, compressible fluid flow. Oh my gosh, I know I'm giving some of you like terrible flashbacks. So all these things, very technical. A lot of our industries, particularly in this new world we're growing into, is very technical. It's not just showing up every day, doing the same thing that the person before you did, that a generation before you did, but that we're innovating at a rate that is tremendous. All right, other side, business side, more, let's say, dollars and cents facing. We don't want to say people facing because it's all people facing. What are the skills that you need for those types of roles, jobs? Finance, accounting, math still, unfortunately, right? What else? Management. Yeah, absolutely. What about law? What about law? What would you say?
Marketing.
Absolutely, marketing, communications. Right, so these like buzzwords kind of feel differentiated. They feel like there's a big divide in the middle. Like the difference between the like stereotypical black box engineer, the guy or gal that just sits at their desk and like cranks out some 30 pages of engineering paper and then hands it to someone else to actually go do it. Or there's someone that's sitting in the marketing world that doesn't actually know what's going on, but has grand ideas, does presentations and billboards and things like that, how can these possibly be connected? As you'll see, as you get out of the academic realm, neither of these can exist without each other. Without a product to sell, there is nothing to do in sales, marketing. Without the people to design, build, or market, you're not doing anything. So all these different people, roles, perspectives are necessary for a successful organization. Does anyone have an entrepreneurial spirit or interest? Excellent, excellent, several in here. Do you think you're going to need all of these to be successful, or can you just be a really good Python coder?
Takes a lot.
Yeah, right? Like, doesn't matter how good your code is if no one wants to buy it, right? We get all these stories of famous entrepreneurs starting in their garages and things like that. And they did have some really, really deep technical knowledge in their field of interest. But unless they could sell the product, unless Bezos could develop a software, develop a system that engaged people, that kept them coming back, none of it mattered, right? So let's talk about this kind of third bucket I mentioned, which is leadership or leading people. What are the core skills you think stand out in leadership? Conflict management, that's a really good one. Active listening, absolutely. Empathy, yes. Goal setting, yeah. Those are all wonderful. What about also being decisive? At some point, the leader has to make decisions. We can't just all sit around and debate and get nothing done. Ultimately, the leader has to be decisive. Does anyone ever heard of Simon Sinek or the Golden Circle, any of that? So we won't go into the Golden Circle, but he's great. I encourage you to look him up. But he has this quote, "Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of the people in your charge." So inherently, being a leader is people-focused. It's results-oriented. It's not about being in charge. It's not about command and control. It's not about being the boss. It's about taking care of the people that are in your charge. And if you do that, you can accomplish way more things than you ever intended or thought you could do by yourself. So these are some large buckets. But you might be wondering, why in the world are we talking about these three things? Like, cool, you just described our educations. What a great speech, glad I showed up. So you have seen, or I guess you saw a little bit when I talked about my own career progression, that I started super technical. Like, I was an engineer's engineer. I came in, got my civil engineering degree, popped in, professional engineering license. I mean, I could not be more of an engineer. I designed large projects to then go implement so that we could flow gas and we could have customers and make money. Engineer's engineer. And then I slowly progressed over to the environmental side, where I started to gain this broader perspective of what does it mean to be an operator on a day-to-day basis? Why are they turning that wrench or tightening that bolt or doing this or that? Why is our commercial team interested in the reliability or the uptime of our assets? Why do we have to brand ourselves as a responsible operator in order to gain, well, one, maintain our customers, but two, to grow our reach? Why do all those different things matter? But it all started with that technical background. But without having the perspective and the knowledge of the business, I was only going to be as effective as my desk. Whatever I could crank out, whatever number of engineering pages I could crank out in order to provide some type of product. It's when I was able to zoom out, step back, put myself in other people's shoes from a diverse set of roles. So operators could not be more different than like corporate accounting or marketing or something like commercial or even our communications team. They're all drastically different. But in order to zoom out, I had to be able to put myself in their perspective. I had to ask, how are they being incentivized? What does success look like for them? What does success, zooming all the way out, look like for the company? And that's how I became more successful, not just in my individual job, but that started to open up doors that I never thought were possible. I started getting invited to meetings that I never thought I should be in. I was sitting around tables, being involved in decisions that as a young engineer, or kind of a pseudo engineer at this point, thought I should be in. It's kind of like they want to be, if anyone knows this reference, please save me. But they want to be in the room where the decisions are made. Anyone know what reference that is? Yep, Hamilton, right? Yeah, so it was like, oh my gosh. I started out as an engineer, but I realized something about myself. I wanted to be in the room where the decisions were made. I wanted to be involved in the strategic discussion, not just the tactical execution. But in order to do that, I had to develop these skills that I didn't learn in class because I was an engineer. So while you do learn engineering econ, for those of you who are in that class, while you do learn metallurgy and why that's important to moving things like hydrogen in our pipelines, there's other things that I needed to do in order to grow. I needed to understand how to do vertical analysis from a finance perspective. Like, why do I care about the time difference between when we have revenue, so when we're recognizing that revenue, and when that cash actually comes in the door? Why does that matter? And most of you are like, I don't know why that matters. Don't worry, you have many, many years to learn all these things. But all these various pieces all these puzzle pieces started to fit together, and it really changed my perspective of not just how could I contribute to the organization, but what was I actually interested in doing as a career. that kind of culminated a little bit. I guess I can't say culminated because I'm 34, so I have many years left of my career. But that has started to snowball. The inertia has carried me into this job as the ESG director. You're like, okay, cool, yeah, environmental. Everyone thinks that's the biggest part. It is. Don't forget the S, the social piece. Don't forget that social isn't just safety. It is safety, but it is not just safety. It's also, as we talked about a second ago, it's also DEI. It's compensation practice. I'm sure all of you want to get paid well for the value you bring at whatever job you're in, right? You want to be engaged at work, feel a sense of belonging. You want to be developed so you can continue to grow or advance. But you also want to be safe. You don't want a pipeline to leak. You don't want an accident to occur. You want to go home to your family at the end of the day, or to your dorm at this point, or house at the end of the day. All these pieces are within that social concept. And then governance. Ultimately, we're a public company. Does everyone know what that means? If you don't know what that means, I'm not going to call you out. Public company, so that means we have shareholders. We are a C Corp, so we don't have unit holders like an MLP, but we have shareholders, which means if you own shares of Williams, you own part of our company. You are the person we are ultimately accountable towards. You and millions of other people, but you do own a piece of the company. And so that's a large part about governance, which is about how do we represent, how do we steward the resources of our actual owners, of our shareholders, and how do we return on their investment. So it's all these weird pieces are just swirling around and really caught my attention, and that's why I came into this role, because I cared about the technical. I cared about making sure we operate safely and we do things the right way. I cared about developing personally and for the people around me, because I had such a deep interest in people. And I also knew, like, at the end of the day, we're a company and our job is to make a return on our shareholder interest, right? Our job is to create economic value, not just for our shareholders, but for all of the users of energy, of natural gas. So we have a fiduciary responsibility, but also we have a responsibility to provide energy for the world, to provide energy for communities to flourish and to grow. So the reason you're probably like, man, this guy's just off the rails. The reason I give you all that perspective is because, once again, nothing is as simple as it seems. You might think you have your whole life planned out, or you know what you really enjoy doing right now. That's why you're studying it. You don't. I promise you don't. You can leverage those skills. You should leverage that passion into that first step, but then you're going to lily pad onto something else. You're going to realize you have another interest. You're going to come over here. Sometimes you might go backwards in order to take a bigger step forwards. There's all these different opportunities that are going to like peek their little heads like Groundhog Day style. They're just going to peek up. You're going to have to decide, is that something I'm going to pursue? Is that something of interest? Does it have short-term value? Does it have long-term value? You all are investing in long-term value right now. Unless you're, I guess, graduating very soon. That's probably much more short-term. But a lot of you are studying and getting an education, paying money. You're investing in yourself to have this long-term value. I'm not going to do an example of like cash flows, so don't worry about that, about value in the future. But all this continued to change my perspective, even as I came into this role. As you've seen, I started out as an engineer's engineer, kind of did something involved with operations, kind of did environmental, so zoomed out, worked with customers, and now I'm in this ESG space, and tipping over, I'm in this ESG space that is actually sits side by side and is, I would say, brothers and sisters with our investor relations team. So I am in the business. So I started out as an engineer, and I am like wholly in the finance and accounting organization. I'm one of 3 engineers in the entire finance and accounting organization at Williams. I think it's 3. Those are the ones I was able to tally. So I thought I was going to be here, ended up way on this side in a field that didn't even really exist in any true, in the force that it did today. ESG as a role in particular at a company, at a corporate level, didn't exist when I was in college. So I was doing all of this work. I was studying for a job that didn't even exist. So how many jobs do you think, as innovation and change is increasing at a higher and higher pace, your acceleration is increasing, not just your velocity? How many of you actually think the job you see is out there now is actually still going to be the exact same job that you see now? Good, none of you raised your hand, that's great. So I encourage you all, when you're thinking about what are the technical things that are important, and what should I be learning when I'm sitting in the chairs you're sitting at a university? If I'm in the business side, or the nutrition, or the communications, or the French, what are the things that I should be learning from that side? But also the soft skills around leadership. What should I be cultivating and developing? None of these things are wasted, but you do need to leverage them appropriately because you never know where you're going to go. Follow your passion, leverage your strengths. I'm not a proponent, and this is probably almost blasphemy in the educational space. Has anyone ever heard, like, work on your weakness until it's a strength? Has anyone ever heard that phrase before? Raise your hand. So most of you have heard that. If something is an innate weakness, it is never going to be your strength. I firmly believe that. That does not mean it will be a deterrent. That does not mean you cannot cultivate that into something that's usable, actionable, leverageable into something else. But your strengths, these innate strengths, these talents you have, those are the ones that you should be focused on most cultivating into something that's exponential on return. You're not going to take something that you're really, really poor at and then be I almost made a superhero reference, like the Batman of something, because he's scared of bats, and then he became Batman. That was where I was going with that. But that's not real life. But if you can cultivate your strengths and your passions into something, you will be successful. And let me take another weird step back. If any of you are super, and let me check my time here, super nerdy like me and kind of get into these TED Talks and motivational speech type things. You've probably also seen it is typically rich people, super successful people, looking back, that tell you to follow your passions, follow your dreams, right? It's like, you will be happy if you just follow your passions, follow your dreams only. That it's going to work out. While that is worked out for them, potentially, I would encourage you a different way. I would say put a majority, just as you put a majority of your focus on your strengths, but still work on your weaknesses, I would encourage you to put most of your focus on what you're good at, not just what you're passionate about. I mean, how many of you wanted to be professional athletes when you were a kid? What about be like an astronaut or a president of the United States, which is definitely still possible. I'm not saying any of you can't do these things, but yeah. So particularly, I feel like a lot of young boys like myself growing up playing lots of different sports are like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a professional soccer player. Done deal, guaranteed. There's no way that could ever go wrong. Yeah, also, I'm not exactly built for that. I'm probably a foot taller than most on that field. But if I would have followed just my passion, I probably would, not necessarily would have fallen flat. I'm not trying to discourage you from following your passions. But what I did is, while doing that, I found the areas within that passion that were true strengths, and I worked on those, and I worked on those, and I worked on those. And I gained a passion for new things, because when you're good at something, you will like it. 100% guaranteed. This is the Zach Keith seal of guarantee. If you're good at something, you will like it. So if you can leverage and cultivate those skills, those strengths, into something bigger, you will love it. And then you can start to, how do I relate that back to my passion? If you have a real passion for kids or dogs or charity work or going to the moon, you can do those things. But even our astronauts, they're not experts in all things. They're biologists that decided, hey, we're going to do some biology research in space. They didn't take an astronaut 101 class, right? They cultivated their skills and they converted that to passion later on. So that was not in my notes, but something I'm very obviously passionate. Man, I got to find a different word. Passionate about. to be successful. So the thing I have written here is the difference between a job or your role and a vocation. Has anyone heard this before? So I might have half stolen this, half made it up. So don't ascribe it to me because I probably stole it. But I see a job or a role that in a specific, so my role right now is ESG director. I see that as, like, that has certain functions. It has a certain scope, it has certain responsibilities and accountabilities, and it has a certain team that allows me to, all of us to work together to produce value, right? That role. I am very satisfied in this role. I love it. It really excites me every day. Let's be honest, it excites me most days. Because we all have some tedium in our work, so I don't want to give you all a false perception of like it's called work. But I have so much excitement almost every day. But I had a ton of excitement as an engineer. So what I realized about myself is a couple of things. One, I believe in, what is the right way to phrase this? I believe in creating additional opportunity. I believe in the theory of optionality a little bit. So I was thinking I have a lot of career left, ideally. That I was like, what are the gaps in my education? What are the skills that might be weaknesses, but are maybe just hidden or dormant talents that I can cultivate? I've used that word a lot. I need to hit a thesaurus before I leave. But what are those maybe dormant talents I can use and interests I have to broaden my perspective? Oh man, full circle moment too. I love that. To broaden that perspective. And it's not all to the end game of adding value to the business. While that is typically how you can promote through an organization, it's also about being fulfilled in my work. So I had this interest in why are we making this strategic decision? This seems not necessarily contrary, but like ancillary to what we've been doing for the last 10 years. Why are we changing direction here? Why are we investing in solar and hydrogen and carbon capture? We're a natural gas company. What in the world are we doing all these things? It's not our core business. And I just got so intrigued by that. So option theory of life, I decided to take a step sideways and say, hey, I'm going to go into something that's more business facing. I got a mentor that was from the commercial business. And then I asked someone to be my advocate so that when a job opened, when I wasn't in the room, they'd be like, hey, you know who'd be a really good fit for this role? Zach, you should see if he's interested. I know he's not a traditional like engineer into F&A organization. That's kind of weird. But they had an advocate that helped me do that. So that's the first. Second, back to the vocation. I believe a vocation is what you actually enjoy about the work, as opposed to the role is like the scope of the work. I found that if I followed my vocation, I could do any number of jobs. Even the dirty jobs, even the hard ones, even like the Alaskan crab fisherman jobs from that TV show type of stuff. And that's because I found that my vocation was a series of things. It was, I really enjoy strategy, not just tactical. Like, I went through engineering school. Like, I can grind it out. Don't get me wrong. Like, I can sit down and work in Excel and like put the headphones on and grind it out for a long time. But I really love strategy. So I want to do something that has that aspect. And that leans itself towards leadership, formal leadership. I really enjoy developing people. So not just my own skills, but developing other people around me. Once again, formal leadership. And then finally, I like to be involved in decisions. I just thought it was so cool to be able to give perspective to and engage with the decision makers. So if I could find any job in the organization that has those things, I think I will be content. And content is not every day is always like 100% everything went your way and happiness all the time. It's content. It's a whole different concept. And now I'm getting more. That's once again a whole nother topic. But that's how I kind of went about that. Is that option theory of life. And then when I found my vocation, I realized there were way more options and opportunities than I ever thought would exist. Because I didn't just have to be an engineer. I could do any of this stuff. But none of that could happen. Back to our discussion on technical versus business or finance related versus formal leadership, that I couldn't do any of that new stuff outside of my technical training unless I put myself in those uncomfortable positions. And it's amazing how you will see how much overlap there is in soft skills between the two. Someone mentioned communication right from the beginning. I tell you what, I don't care how good of an engineer you are, if you can't communicate, you're going to be stymied in your career. When you can take complex ideas and simplify them for like a fourth grader, I don't care what you're doing, you will be successful. I guarantee it. Great question. All right, and you actually, like I said, it was a great transition. So, we're coming up closer to time. We're at 12:16 here, and if anyone has to jet, please feel free. But let's talk a little bit about the importance of academics really quick. In the partnership with the business, this is just a 1 minute. Williams doesn't just do internal development, internals like R&D work. We actually work with universities, particularly land-grant universities. What a great week to be here. To do research that is cutting edge from our industry and others. I mean, truly, we're not one of those shops that does everything in-house, everything internal in our own little lab, or only work with like Sandia or some other national lab. We work with universities. That's our preference, because you bring a whole different, once again, perspective to the research. You bring a whole new outsider's viewpoint to the work. So really just wanted to shout that out because I saw the land grant thing up and the announcement and the new statue, which is awesome. So I had to bring that up. So I encourage you all, Williams is not the only company to do that. Well, I think we're the best. No. But like, I really encourage you all, don't get too in your university bubble. Start to look outside. How can you engage with community? How can you engage with companies and kind of take your ideas and your perspectives and put them out there into the universe? Cool. All right. My last point was about the clean energy future, which is truly like the greatest challenge of your generation. Like, how in the world are we going to continue to provide secure, reliable, and affordable energy that is also continuously decarbonized, continuously, I don't want to say greened up, but is continuously driving towards a future that is more sustainable from a climate perspective? That's the big challenge. That challenge, the solution to that, we don't have yet. Honestly, there's probably technologies that have not been invented yet that are going to be linchpins in this success, globally and domestically. And it's you all who are not just going to be running the businesses, but probably a high probability that some of you might be helping to invent some of those things. A lot of that, like I mentioned, that research, a lot of the modern research that's going to change create an inflection point in the success of reliable, affordable, secure, and decarbonized electricity is probably going to come from corporate and university partnerships, people that are working to solve problems, attacking problems and not attacking people, saying there's a lot of ideologies, how can we work on solving a problem together and put all that other stuff aside? And the academic sphere is something that fosters that well, unlike a lot of other privately funded organizations, research things that become very driven towards whatever that ideological perspective was. So you all have a tremendous opportunity, not just because you're going to be in the workforce for the next 30, 40 years, but also because you sit currently in a university setting. So that was kind of the last big, it wasn't really a hurrah, but it should have really crescendoed more there at the end. But I wanted to mention that because it is a true challenge. It's not something we're going to be able to ignore. It's what the people are demanding. But at the same time, if we zoom out, if we get outside of our little box, going back to perspectives, if we zoom out and look at not just our very, I don't want to say entitled, but very privileged existence here in the US, if you zoom out to the rest of the world, over 60% of the world's population is in some sort of energy poverty. 60%. That's absolutely astounding. You have, I believe it's 1 in 12. No, I believe it's 1 in 4 people in the world are using some sort of very old school and very, I shouldn't use negative either. They're using like personally burning coal, animal waste products, like dung, moss and things, so like greenery and kerosene in their individual homes to heat water, to disinfect water, to cook food, to wash things, all those things. That is 1 in 4 people in the world. That's an astounding number of people. So when we think about not just the challenges of decarbonizing in the US and how we're so attached to our iPads and our lights and our air conditioning, especially in the South, but when we think about like the true need and the necessity of energy, of reliable and affordable energy for human flourishing, you could not be at a better time to be exiting a university. I mean, you all are going to be like smack dab in the middle of solving this problem. So, thank you for inheriting it from us. And we really hope you all be excited about trying to solve it.